Tropical disturbances developing in the Western Pacific on tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for October 14th. Still a similar situation to yesterday, with Tropical Storm Karl and Tropical Depression 21W at opposing sides of the world. Karl weakening due to high wind shear as it sinks towards the coast of the Bay of Campeche, and 21W continuing further towards the north. In the Atlantic, day 136 of hurricane season, Karl there getting closer to land. Landfall will probably be in around 36 hours or so, and a 20% chance of development now in the eastern Atlantic. Could be a short-lived tropical cyclone, we'll see. In the eastern Pacific, day 153 of hurricane season there, and now nothing on the horizon for the next 5 days at least. So eastern Pacific, a little bit of a gap here in proceedings, or perhaps a little bit of an extended one. The last storm that was fully in the basin was Orlean. In the Western Pacific, look at this now, two very large high chances there. The 90% just off the coast of Vietnam. We're really waiting just for a centre of circulation to become apparent, and then we'll declare a tropical depression or storm. And 80% for that one we've been tracking for quite some time, headed towards the Luzon Strait. In the Indian Ocean, I know people are wondering about whether we'll be tagging that one this time around, and tonight the answer is still no. Models still have that system in the 5 to 10 day period. We'll check it out on the models in a few moments. So let's check the latest satellite imagery. This is what the Atlantic is looking like right now, and you can see that Karl is looking a lot less symmetrical than it did yesterday, a lot more sloppy and flat, and it's influence extending across that trot line all the way up through southern Florida over Cuba, enhancing thunderstorms, and up towards the northeast of the US. In the eastern Pacific, dry air dominating, not many systems there or even thunderstorms from convective activity from tropical disturbances there. A little area that's progressing further west, but generally the eastern Pacific is pretty stifled. Take a look at some proper imagery here from the rapid scan. Goes 16 just as we lose daylight there over Karl, and those very hot towers there blowing up some extremely high altitudes. You can see those shadows extending magnificently right towards the end of the daylight there, and as we enter night mode on the infrared, how that storm appears. A grey screen there for a few seconds whilst we load up the next scene, and you can see there once again those cloud tops blowing up right in the centre, but you can see the very sharp gradient on the northwestern side, denoting very high amounts of wind shear, quoted to me earlier around 40 or 45 knots to the north, and about 20 to 25 knots over the centre of the storm right now, which will be underneath that highest amount of convection. So the cloud tops being blown towards the southeast, and it's going to struggle from here on in. Western Pacific view, you can see that system on the left hand side just off the coast of Vietnam, already delivering significant rainfall and possibly tropical storm force winds. An ASCAP pass will occur later today, and hopefully it will pass over the system, and if we need any confirmation by that point, we'll be able to declare a tropical cyclone. On the wide shot, you can see Tropical Depression 21W on the right hand side looking very messy, and the other system that's headed towards the Philippines, not much rotation in that, but still very strong signals from all models for development later on. Here's another view of the Western Pacific today, and you can just see just so much going on here, so many disturbances and tropical cloud cover and thunderstorms. Another system could even develop out of this mess as we get towards the weekend into early next week, as we continue to watch the Western Pacific trying and mainly failing to develop significant tropical systems, but of course the rain rates are going to be through the roof in some areas. Indian Ocean still looking fairly quiet, India getting a few thunderstorms as is the usual. And in the southern hemisphere, let's take a look here. Australia, a front moving through the eastern part, loosely associated with what was left of Balita, and another system pushing through Fiji and its potential centre of location there to the southwest, We did earmark that for a possible tropical cyclone development, but quickly thought better of it. It shows there no chance of becoming a tropical system. Sea surface temperatures remain nearly 30 degrees Celsius off the coast of Mexico in the Pacific. In the Atlantic, on the Bay of Campeche coast, where Karl is, around 28, maybe 29 degrees in a few little areas. The Caribbean is still the warmest part of the Atlantic Ocean, particularly an area off Haiti and Cuba, around 30 degrees Celsius. Further north, temperatures starting to cool off just a little bit, but still decent conditions all the way up to Bermuda and possibly beyond in some areas. In the Indian Ocean, it's actually increasing in heat just at the moment there, 30 degree isotherm extending quite a bit further south, so if this system that we're talking about forms, then it's got even more 30 degree temperatures to play with there. Off the coast of Vietnam, temperatures dropping a little bit under the influence of that storm, upwelling possibly already beginning, and further into the Philippine Sea, decent temperatures as well, 29 to 30 degrees across that whole area there. Sea surface temperatures will not be a problem, right the way up to the southern islands of Japan, unless a system goes off the east coast of China, in which they will struggle there. The anomalies staying very much the same compared to what we were looking at in previous days. The La Nina still in full force, Western Pacific generally above average, Eastern Pacific hit and miss, and the Atlantic is also generally above average, apart from the areas that Ian affected a few weeks ago, which is still pedaling up around normal. And the oceanic heat content is still looking pretty inspiring for the Western Caribbean for any future storms, so let's hope none of them end up there. Bay of Campeche not so for Karl. In the Eastern Pacific there, still a few small little areas, and in the Western Pacific still looking decent for the Philippine Sea, and you'll find that continues pretty much the whole year round. South China Sea though, not very much there. Let's check the GFS computer models then, and this is what it shows for Karl. Weakening, and then just another tropical storm peak briefly there, and then it just hobbles along the coast of Mexico from Tabasco to Veracruz and makes landfall as a weak depression, possibly not even a depression by that point. It might just be a remnant low, so we'll see what happens there. So hopefully it's not going to be an impact, but of course don't forget tropical storm warnings are still in effect right now, and you could be hit with tropical storm force winds in that area. Western Pacific, looking at the day up to day 5, you can see Vietnam getting hit with that storm, and then the main one that comes in here through the Luzon Strait and into the South China Sea becomes a typhoon. GFS has been pushing it further and further west with its model runs. Who knows what happens after that? I think it stalls a little bit there in the South China Sea. And that third system, well, there's 21W going off up there, very messy all the way through. And GFS wants another system forming behind that in the Philippine Sea there, moving off towards the north. So potentially another typhoon later on. Take a look at the rainfall expectations, first of all from the system to the west, affecting Vietnam potentially with up to 30 inches of rain there, so a really wet storm coming from something that might not even get a name. So Vietnam there, that coastal region, really watch out for that. In the Philippines there, from the other invest, 97W, up to 18 or 19 inches there, that's nearly 500 millimeters. 30 inches in Vietnam, that's well more than that, I can't even calculate it, nearly 800 I think. And in Taiwan also getting some rain on the side from 97W as well over the next few days. They could get as much as 17 inches up there in the northern part of Taiwan, which is just over 400 millimeters in total over that 7-day period. Looking to the longer range, this is the Atlantic, the open waters, and you can see the formation of another storm there that might develop from that 20% that we've marked in the eastern Atlantic, or it might be the one behind it. And there it is, becoming a hurricane and moving off towards the east in the end. Don't tell me that's going to have a weird track now, but it looks like that will start to continue heading possibly just south of east and weaken off and die off eventually as it goes back towards the eastern Atlantic. Not a land threat. The Eastern Pacific, looking over this period as well, day 5 to 10, another system trying to form there. Doesn't last very long before it gets pushed down by those winds through the Gulf of Tehuantepec, but it does try and get itself together again towards the end of that 10-day period, so that's something to watch for a potential later season Mexican threat, but at the moment nothing on our books. Western Pacific for that 5 to 10 day period. Let's watch what happens with all of this. There's actually 4 systems there for a brief period, but the 2 main ones, the first Typhoon eventually hobbles over to Vietnam, and the second one becomes quite powerful there, becoming probably a category 3 before shuffling off towards the northeast and continuing to move off that direction after day 10 on the GFS model. So this is just one scenario. It could be completely different to what we're looking at, as I've said last night and in previous occasions. This is a particularly difficult one to forecast. Lots of uncertainty, a lot of variables, and the more variables you have, the less of a forecast certainty that you have. Indian Ocean has a storm of its own as well in that day 5 to 10 period. You can see how much that's changed though since previous times. That's a landfall there much further south. I can't remember which province that might be. I think it might be Andhra Pradesh still, but still a substantial storm on the forecast for the GFS as we get towards day 10. Category 1 or 2 at landfall. That could still change yet as well though. That's all the serious stuff done with. You can scan the barcode and take a look at the Force 13 merch store, which includes the full season and individual animations on request, bespoke animations to your choosing, and are still waiting for Hone t-shirt along with our other products over there in our merch store. Well, in the Scilly range, that's day 10 to 16. What happens to that storm then? Oh no, it's not going to do a full circle, is it? That's a very interesting track, and it does eventually just... Well, is it dying off? Yep, it is dying off eventually, but it was almost in 2 minds there as to whether it might go round again. That would be something to behold. Who knows? Maybe one of the model ensembles might be saying that, and that might come closer to fruition as we get closer, but we'll see. But nonetheless, that's the only real thing that we're looking at in the Atlantic after Karl, so it does look like that this season really is winding down. In the Eastern Pacific, this other system here, you can see it there, after surviving some difficult first few days, becomes a hurricane. Very erratic track there. It stalls, it does a little loop-de-loop, and then it goes northwards and northeastwards into landfall in Mexico on the 29th. So that is some way out, 15 days until we get that eventual landfall, possibly as category 1 or 2 in the central part of coastal Mexico. But as I say, a long way out, something to watch for with interest, but not something to prepare for yet. Well, what happened on this day in the world of storms? It was October 14th, 2012, my first year of public updates on storm tracking, and I was doing updates on Cyclone Inez. I did 3 updates on that storm in the South Indian Ocean, a category 4 at this point on this day. And quite rare for it to happen, very rare for it to happen so early in the Southern Hemisphere season. Elsewhere we had Typhoon Prapiroon, Tropical Storm Maria in the Western Pacific, Raphael in the Atlantic, and Paul in the Eastern Pacific. All of them, I think, deserve honourable mentions there, and I think I did updates on all of those. Back to this year, 10 years later, and in the Atlantic, our next name on the list is Lisa. In the Eastern Pacific, it's going to be Roslyn, and in the Central Pacific, we are indeed still waiting up for Hone. Very long time. In the Western Pacific, our next name is Sonka, and it felt like we've been really close to getting the name, but we still don't have it yet. In the North Indian Ocean, Sitrang is still next up, and that's also been in the pipeline for God knows how long, but still some way away. In the Australian region, Darian is next. In the Southwest Indian Ocean, Cheniso, and in the South Pacific, the next name is Harley. That's all for tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night.